Hey, congratulations, pastors. You just pushed through Christmas, but the celebration is kind of short lived, huh? I mean, you're already thinking about, believe it or not, Easter. Your inbox is full, your team needs clarity, the budget needs attention, and guess what? Here comes Sunday, because every 7 days, and it feels like every 4 days. And somewhere inside you, and listen, I've been there, I get it. Somewhere inside you, you are hoping this year is going to be different. That this will be the year that we finally make progress. This will be the year we build that discipleship pathway or create financial margin or fill in the blank, whatever it is. But then you open your calendar. And what you do is what most every pastor, every church does. You drag last year's events into this year. You tweak a few dates. You add a new idea or two because, you went to a conference or read a book. And before long, come on, 2026 starts to look a lot like 2025, just with a different number at the top of the page. Now, that's the issue. And it's the issue we're going to address today because a new year doesn't create new outcomes. You know that. A new year doesn't create new clarity. I mean, a fresh page on a calendar doesn't create fresh momentum. If you've kind of felt stuck, inside of a model that, isn't producing the growth that your vision, by the way, deserves, you already sense all of that, right? You have felt the gap between what you desire, what your vision looks like, what your mission holds true, and what you're experiencing, what the reality is. I mean, I'm telling you, in my coaching and consulting work, I see this pattern again and again and again. Most pastors, or maybe no pastor, we would say, drifts, right, because they lack passion or calling. I mean, you wouldn't be in this job if you didn't feel called to it. Churches and pastors drift because they just lack, and this is such a key word, it's my word of the year, maybe the word of the next decade for me, intentionality. People drift, pastors drift just because they lack intentionality. They're leading, and I get it, you're leading under constant pressure with very little space to rethink or redesign something. When I worked at North Point, we said this all the time. It's almost impossible to work in it or work on it when you're so busy working in it. So today, I want to help you move from pressure to intention by walking through, and we're going to do six specific decisions that can change how you lead in 2026. 6 decisions for 2026. And listen, these are not theory. These are practical choices that I've made, a lot of my church clients have made, and they're choices that you can make month after month after month to make this year different than last year. And if you will make them, they are going to shape every week, every meeting, and every outcome that you experience. Okay, you ready? Let's walk through them. 6 decisions for 2026. Here's the first one. Decision number 1. I want you to decide what matters the most this year. Decide what matters the most this year, right? Clarity, and I talk about this all the time. Clarity is the cornerstone of intentional leadership. Okay, so before you schedule a single event for 2026, I would love for you to answer one question. What must be true by this time next year for us to say that this was faithful and a fruitful year? Like, what must be true this time in a year from today? What must be true for us to look back and say we were faithful and it was a fruitful year? Now, not what would be nice to have or, what did we always do? Okay, what must be true? And I'd like you to do this. Just write down a couple of those answers, maybe 3 at the most, okay? Maybe it's something like, just as an example, we're going to have a stronger leadership pipeline in a year from today. We're going to have more people taking clear next steps along our discipleship pathway. We're going to design an intentional discipleship pathway. We're going to close the generosity gap so that we can begin to fully fund our mission. Again, it could be, there are dozens of things that you may come up with, but write down 1 or 2, maybe 3 max. And when you define these, again, 1, 2, or 3, when you define them, you're going to now have a filter. And every sermon, every series, every event, every initiative is going to be now evaluated through those things that you just wrote down. Here's what's going to happen if you do this. It's going to lower some of the pressure because you're no longer going to feel responsible to do everything. You're going to be responsible to do what matters the most. That's the first decision. Okay, decision number 2. Decide what you will stop doing this year. What are you going to stop doing? This is going to get very uncomfortable, okay? Not this conversation, but if you take this seriously, what are you going to stop doing? Most churches, most churches do not suffer from a lack of activity. There's way too much activity. Most churches suffer from misalignment of all the activity. Why would we keep ministries alive long after they've stopped serving the mission? And then we wonder why everything feels so heavy and why we're always so busy and people are burning out. Well, of course, it's because we're doing so many things that aren't on mission. You know this about burnout, right? When you are living in mission, you can almost pile the calendar full and not burn out because everything has purpose and it's producing the right outcome. It's when we're working really hard and running in place. It's like running on a treadmill. Eventually, that burns any of us out. Now, remember this, intentionality is not about addition. It is about alignment. I'm not suggesting you add a bunch of things. In fact, I'm actually suggesting you cut a bunch of things, or at least a few things. But align all of the things. So here's what you can do. Just take an honest look at your ministries and ask just a couple of questions. Does this still move our mission forward? Does this program, this event, this class, whatever it is, does it still, not did it, but does it still move our mission forward? Second question, if we were starting from scratch today, would we launch this thing? That is a hard question. It's painfully clarifying. Whether it's an event, again, a class, a program, it doesn't matter. If we were starting our church today, would we launch this program? Would we launch this event? Okay, and don't rationalize it and say, well, if we were starting a church today, we wouldn't have money. None of that. Be intellectually honest. Would you do this again if you were given the chance? Listen, if the answer is no, at least consider sunsetting it. And I want to say, get rid of it, but I understand. I've lived in your world before. I've been in ministry for over 20 years, was a lead pastor for 13. I had to sunset some things, and it is not easy or fun to do it, but it always made our mission more effective. I have sat with pastors who freed up entire nights of the week or weeks of the year, seasons, multiple staff hours, just by having the courage to stop doing something that was no longer effective. So stopping is not failure. Stopping is actually stewardship. This is a stewardship of your mission. And it's one of the fastest ways that you can lower the pressure and be more effective. All right, that's decision 2. Decision 3, we're going to go 6, remember? Decision 3, decide how your calendar is going to support your goals. Once you know what matters, right? And once you've already decided what doesn't matter as much anymore, the things that need to go, it's time for you to let your goals drive your dates. We're going to talk about goals a lot more in a couple of weeks, but it's time for your goals to drive your dates, not your calendar to drive your dates. So as we've said, right, most pastors copy last year's calendar into this year, and then they try to fit new things into it or, squeeze in the goals for this year into those gaps. I want you to flip that process. So start with your 1, 2, or 3 mission critical goals that we talked about, and then ask these questions of them. What sermon series do we need to do this year to support these goals? Or series, right? Plural. What key initiatives or events are truly necessary in light of these goals? Where do we need intentional rest and recovery built in because of the goals and how we're going to structure things? Then you build your entire calendar year around those answers. I worked with a church that realized that their fall calendar was so packed with events, and several of them, not all, but several of them really had nothing to do with their discipleship pathway. But I tell you what, they were exhausting, and their staff and their volunteers were getting very tired very quickly, and it didn't feel like anybody was moving really forward. So what we did, right? We pulled the calendar apart, and we rebuilt that fall into winter calendar around clear next steps, discipleship pathway, and within a year, their kind of overwhelmed conversations turned into, we know exactly what we're doing and why we're doing it, and we're not tired or exhausted of doing it. So a calendar aligned to your mission lowers the pressure in the organization because you are no longer busy at random things. You're busy with purpose. All right, decision number 4. Isn't this fun? Decision number 4. And you can do all of these. These are not overwhelming decisions. They're just sit down and be intentional thinking decisions. So number 4, decide how you're going to measure progress. You cannot improve what you refuse to measure. Now, I've talked about this a lot, okay? Measurement is a big deal. I love metrics. I love data. I love stats. I love all that stuff. Now, not everything that matters can be measured. I get that. However, everything that we can measure is going to matter. So as a pastor, right, we often feel pressure because we're leading from assumptions, right? Most pastors, we have this vague sense of whether things are better or worse, but we don't really have a global agreed upon definition of better. This is why the metric conversation is so important. So you don't need, and this may be good news for you, you don't need a complex dashboard, okay? What you really need is just a little bit of honest visibility into what's happening in the church. So just choose a simple set of metrics that matter for this season, for this year, for Q1, and that matter against those goals that we have set. It could be things like engagement trends, group participation, volunteer involvement, generosity, first-time givers, new signs up for recurring giving, movement steps along your discipleship path. Again, it could be any number of things, but set it up, make it a page. Don't try to make a 50-page document here, okay? Just make it simple, but make sure the things on there are actionable because data that isn't actionable is just wasted time. So make it actionable data that helps you know if you're making progress towards your goals and then eventually to your mission. Now, once you've decided what needs to be on that dashboard, this is pretty easy. Just set a rhythm. And it could be like once a month, you and your team just review those numbers and you ask some questions. What are we learning? What needs to change? Here's the deal. And man, I lived this out. When you measure the right things, 2 things are going to happen. First, you're going to catch problems way earlier, which is going to reduce some of the pressure for you. Second, you're going to get to celebrate actual progress, not it feels like progress. And the problem with it feels like, just before we move on, the problem with it feels like is we all can come up with a story to substantiate what we're doing. And we all can find one story that proves the progress is there, the event should happen. But we're not looking for an individual isolated story. We're looking for trends and steps. And that's what metrics help you do. I believe we should celebrate anecdotal stories, and that should be a part of our measurement technique. But it can't be the only way we measure because it really dilutes what's actually happening. Okay, 2 more. Decision number 5. Decide how you will develop people on purpose. Okay, discipleship, and we all know this, but let me just say it out loud. Discipleship never happens by accident. In fact, nothing great happens by accident. If your kind of church model is, show up on Sunday and hope something sticks, okay, you're always going to feel frustrated. When you feel the pressure of why are people not growing without a clear path? Well, you have to answer that. Actually, just quick caveat, this is where the thing that I built, this framework called the 5 Rights Discipleship Framework, the 5 Rights Discipleship Framework, this is why it helps so much because here's what we do with it, just really quick. We want to make sure that the right person is getting the right message at the right time in the right way that leads to the right next step. Those are the 5 rights. If that's new to you, by the way, first, welcome to the podcast. You can read a lot more about that at gavinadams.com. That's my kind of framework for helping churches uncover what a discipleship pathway framework can look like in their unique situation in their church, okay? So let's get back to the conversation. Here's what you should do. Take one segment of your people. Remember the 5 rights. The first one is the right person. Take one segment of people in your church. Maybe it's new attenders or, mature believers. It doesn't matter. Okay. Just pick one segment and ask the rest of the 5 rights questions. Okay. Who are they really? Like what category are they really? What do they need next? When are they most open to hear about next steps or have a conversation? How will we communicate in a way that they can receive or have dialogue with us about what we want to talk about? What specific step do we want them to take? Again, if you think about the different categories of people, each of these categories, we want to offer unique different steps for them because they are at a unique place along their discipleship journey. So just design something specific around those answers. Again, if we talk about, first-time attendees, if that's the segment we want to focus on, maybe it's just a first step environment, a way to give some very clear on-ramps to groups or, a short course. It doesn't even really matter what you decide. Well, I guess it does to some extent, but decide something and make it a next step. And so when you design discipleship on purpose like that, you relieve a lot of pressure because you're not guessing and blaming anymore, right? You know what you're asking people to do and where you are asking them to go. That's such a huge, huge opportunity. All right, last decision, last one. Number 6, decide how you will lead with less pressure and more intention. This is a catch-all, okay? But the last decision is really more about you personally as a pastor, as a leader, okay? Pressure, I talk a lot about it because it's such a big deal for us. Pressure is inevitable in ministry. There's no way to avoid it completely. But being led by the pressure, that's optional. There's always going to be pressure, but are you going to navigate it or is it going to navigate or lead you? You're not going to stumble into healthy rhythms. Nobody drifts into a better healthy space, right? You have to decide to do that. So what weekly practices will help you lead from intention instead of reaction this year? What intentional practices do you need to put in place every week so that you can be a more intentional leader, a proactive leader, not a reactive leader? I don't know what this is for you. It's different for all of us. Maybe it's a consistent planning block where you just work on the ministry, not just in it. I used that phrase earlier. Maybe it's a weekly review of your calendar and goals. Maybe it's a monthly offsite, don't get crazy, morning. Just once a month, you take one morning, from 9 to noon, and you do it with your team, and you think and you pray. And it's not as much about weekly progress. It's about future-focused thinking. Or maybe you take like a real Sabbath and you protect it like you protect Sunday for your congregation. Listen, these practices, they do not remove your responsibility. They give you space to carry it better. It's such a big deal. And, just really quick, I kind of thought of this as I was chatting with you. Let me give you one more bonus decision, okay? We won't call it number 7, but we'll just give you a bonus. 6B, decide who's going to help you be more intentional. I think you got to have somebody helping you with this too. This is a hard job. Some of you are bivocational. Some of you are a full-time staff member, but you're by yourself. You don't have much support. You have volunteers and elders, but they have other full-time jobs. I mean, listen, I've been there before. I've done this in ministry as a bivocational before, which there is no such thing. You're on call all the time. I've led a very small church with just a handful of staff and no money. I got to lead a rapidly growing church. We eventually got to lead a church where, 7 or so thousand people a weekend, and I had 60 something staff members. So listen, I get it. Anywhere along this continuum though, you need people along with you. You can't really do it well alone, no matter what your situation looks like. Sometimes the most spiritual and strategic thing you can do is invite someone along for the journey with you, whether it's a coach or a roundtable group or, just a trusted partner in your leadership. And the hard part of this is it probably can't be somebody in your church because you are their pastor. Maybe it could be another pastor in your community if that's the kind of community you live in. But again, not all of us have that luxury. It could be somebody like me, but maybe you don't feel that would be an option. It doesn't matter who it is. You just got to find somebody who's been there and who's willing to walk with you through it as you navigate it. So let me just wrap up this with kind of one simple thought. If you walk away from this episode and you just repeat last year's calendar, nothing's going to change. Well, actually, that isn't true. Something may change, but it's just going to get worse. It's probably not going to change for the better. The pressure is not going to get easier. And I don't want to be Debbie Downer, but you're probably going to feel as frustrated as you've ever felt before, and maybe even more frustrated by March or April. But if you will choose even one of these decisions from the list and you will act on it over maybe the course of this first month of the year, you're going to start moving from pressure to progress. You're going to feel it. So here's just your next step. Very simple. I would love to encourage you to block 60 minutes on your calendar and just label it 2026 design session. Call it whatever you want. But during the hour, I just would love for you to ponder two questions. Okay, number one, what must be true by this time next year for us to say that we were faithful and the year was fruitful? What must be true? Second question, what do we need to stop doing to help make that possible? That's it. Write those two answers down. Share them with a trusted leader on your team maybe, or with a elder board, somebody like me, whoever it is. And by the way, you don't have to have a perfect plan to get started. You just need to have an intentional decision that sets the direction. Because, last thing, 2026, it's not going to improve itself. But a person like you who's intentional, you can.